welcome again to another edition of Conversations with and for Entrepreneurs You Love. My name is Craig Oldham. I'm the managing partner at Madlow Executive Advisors, and I am joined today by Jamie Klein, who's the CEO of Inspire Human Resources. And throughout her career, Jamie has collaborated with senior leaders at Fortune 500 as well as startup companies to hire and retain their talent. Jamie, welcome.
Thank you, Craig. Thanks for having me.
It's so great to have you here. One of the things we always talk about at Madlow, it's one of the 4 pillars of growth, is organizational design, talent. It's that, as I describe it, it's kind of that intangible kind of thing that each organization has, right? And before we kind of dig into that topic today, would love to understand what you're doing at Inspire Human Resources and how, what are you guys doing over there?
Oh my gosh. So, what happens when you run a company that provides HR is that you're always trying to be best in class for HR for the folks who work at your company. So talk about the stuff that keeps you up at night. I'm always focused on culture. So what are we up to? So we, like you, provide fractional HR talent. And I always say fractional work makes us whole as humans to kind of do other things. So the thing that's always top of mind when we think about culture is, are we providing employee experience for 30 plus HR folks where they can dial up and dial down based on whatever they've got going on the home front? So that's always top of mind. So when we think about, how can we get the right talent on the project, the biggest thing that we're thinking about is who's got the skill set and the culture fit, but man, who has availability? So providing that level of flexibility is like now in vogue for everyone, but that's kind of part of our DNA. So that's the thing that's always really key. As we hit month 28 of the pandemic, I think folks really need the downtime this summer. So that's been a big thing on our mind. Are we adequately staffed so that everyone can have the fractional experiences that they want? So that's thing one.
Yeah.
Thing two for us is really around how in this moment where I really see inclusion as urgent for businesses, how do we weave that into every project that we touch, whether it's, HR business partner work, recruiting, comp, ben, how do you bring in those DEIB considerations? And so we've actually spent the last quarter really formalizing some tools, templates, ideas so that at the kickoff of every project, we always have those consistently woven in. There's a guy in our team, Dave, he's amazing. And he literally teaches the Cornell certificate program in diversity. And he's one of our experts. And so we spent hours together on Friday doing some videos with me so that we can kind of kick off every project with those considerations, no matter what the project is. So that has been a big focus. So flexibility, even in diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging. And the third thing that's going on for us is I always live in the future, Craig. So always thinking like, what's the next thing, right? It wasn't just a moment ago that it was all about how can we attract and retain top talent for our clients, but also for us, right? It was a market where so much was shifting around the employee experience. And now, as we look at the economics, we might be going into an economic downturn. So I'm always thinking about how do we kind of insulate ourselves from risks so that those things are not a distraction from us. So spending time with my leadership team just to think about all those moving pieces. So, when I talk to clients, they're kind of thinking about the same thing, right? Like flexibility, retaining talent, EIB, and getting ready for the next big thing. And it's the same thing for us internally. Yeah.
Yeah. I think about HR and I think we clicked on this the first time we had the conversation, and HR to me, like marketing in a lot of ways, is really going through a huge transformation. And it's amazing to see what you guys are doing and how you're really helping business senior leaders across all spectrums and sizes of business really utilize HR in a way to help grow their business. And one of the things that when we're coaching and working with CMOs, there's 2 important relationships that they need to have. One is with the CFO and the other one is with the CHRO, because really they are controlling how people act with your brand. And if people aren't acting and you're not creating that culture, then it's not going to come through in your brand. So I love what you guys are doing. And that's a bridge into the conversation today, which is really, what are the three things that organizations can do? When I think of organizations, especially with mid-market companies, the CEO really kind of sets the tone and the culture of the organization. And a lot of times we talked about it's those intangible components there. In your opinion, what are what are the top three things?
I'm laughing
That's a
because no,
that's a
no,
hard question. I know.
that's cool. No, you're cool. I'm laughing because if you and I were to have met 2 years ago, 3 years ago, there would be a different list. And I always say to our clients, there's a new sheriff in town, there's a new set of leadership competencies in town. And you're ready, you know, golfing and flying to Chicago for an urgent client meeting, like, are not the two competencies. The number one
Right.
competency is emotional intelligence. It's all
Mhm,
about EQ. So what we're talking to our clients about is showing up with absolute authenticity. And this
mhm,
term we've been talking about, everyone knows growth mindset, but like having a growth mindset and just realizing that we are living and working in times I call VUCA, volatile, uncertain,
mhm,
complex, and ambiguous. So in these VUCA times, you need to be ready as a human and as a leader to pivot at a moment's notice. And that mindset is kind of all that you have control over, right?
yep,
Because of all the things. So I think the number one thing that we are always focused on with our clients is to be incredibly authentic, and
mhm,
also just hold space for the humans that you work with. So this brings me
mhm,
to point two, which is that we're at month 28 of this pandemic. This did not last 2 weeks. And there is a new urgency for just letting people bring their whole selves to work. That doesn't mean going to a midtown office. It means just letting people bring to their job their superpowers, and kind of rethinking, how do you help folks really love their work. There's been so much research that shows that during these uncertain times, people only want to work for mission driven organizations and in mission
mhm,
driven roles. So finding ways to get people really energized about their day job, make it feel like it's really linked to the macro business strategy, and also understand how they can use all of their own personal kind of
mm,
superpowers to use all their strengths that they love. So that's kind of a second cultural thing that we're seeing. And the third thing is really around a bit of what we're just doing internally, like really showing up for this moment and realizing that, look, it is hard to pick up, your news in the morning and you hear that the likes of, Carvana, like so many companies are announcing potential
mhm,
reductions in force, and they're planning for these things. And I think that as a leader, you need to be the one that is so steady, where you are centering your customers, but also centering your employees to say, well,
yep,
we don't know what's next, we've made it through all of this, and we are still, like that Elton John song, I'm still standing, right? Like, you're still standing, so here we are. And part of the adventure of being a human and a business person during these times is just showing up and just always
mhm,
reinventing for the market, for the client, but also just holding space for that, like being like a huge Rubbermaid lasagna sized Tupperware, like being a container for all of the uncertainty for folks, both as humans, but also the way that your consumers are feeling. What did I read that over the weekend, that Target, the store we
mhm,
go into buy paper towels, and like you buy 23 things, like Target is starting to report a quick dip, a dip in consumer spend. Like,
yep.
people are paying attention to these, the market is. So just being that steady force among all the volatility is the third cultural piece.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I love that. And that was a lot. We got to unpack all of this stuff because this is huge, right? Because what you've done is, these are the things that people know how to do, but these are probably the most foreign things when you think about, as leadership begins to develop and you're sitting around the boardroom and you're beginning to act around these things, because this has created, let's just talk about the first one. Let's go through emotional intelligence, which is huge, and being authentic with who you are and who you are as a company, and how to, and we're going to get into this too, is just how do you balance that kind of drive for growth
Mhm.
and your ability to kind of be authentic, and yet everybody is still kind of remote, and we're kind of coming back, and you're balancing those two things between a recession and growth. And sometimes I think as a CEO, and the ones that I've had experience with in the past, it's like that's really hard to still be authentic and have emotional intelligence and have
Mhm.
empathy, which really helps create that culture. How do you what's the first step? Let's, I know
Yeah,
there's plenty of steps. What's
yeah.
what's the first thing that you
Okay.
got to do on that one?
Right, right. So first step, and like this was like one of our first tips to folks,
Yeah.
during this time. So talk a touch about what you've
Hmm.
got going on the home front.
Yeah. I love
You
that.
don't, like, if you are like, look, there are many leaders who live, who are able to work from a space that
Hmm.
is stunning, and they might have employees who they're on Zoom with who work in more modest spaces, maybe without any outdoor space. And it's also like
Right.
a premium thing during this time. So I think thing one is to just be aware of your virtual background, right? Be aware of the things that you're talking about. If you find yourself jetting out to the Hamptons on the weekend and making it, like Billy Joel and Dua Lipa and Paul McCartney who was at MetLife on Thursday, like you might not want to talk about
Hmm.
all those things, but you could talk about things that are human, like
Yeah.
for those of us with students, kids in the house, school's been finishing up for people last week, this week, next week. Like that just feels like a human experience, and the juggle that comes with that, or trying to find a way to regather with family and friends at a pavilion or a park during these times where the pandemic won't quit, just because you just want to show up and see people. Like I think that those types of things just feel so universal and so human.
Hmm.
I think talking about those types of things. We've also had a lot of leaders that have been really authentic and said, I'm burnt out. I'm a touch tired. Brene Brown, who I
Yeah.
love, she announced
Yep.
in that
Yeah.
she's taking off the summer and for 14 weeks going dark on social because she just needs a pause. Like I think that we're just in a moment where there's actually a new currency that's being, there's new
Hmm.
currency that authentic. Why? Because it lets other people feel like it's okay if they've got school age kids that are out for summer and they're not quite sure what they're going to do with them, or it's okay if they feel a touch tired, if leaders are being that authentic. So that's what I mean
Hmm.
about the first thing about just being
Yeah.
authentic. We're obsessed at Inspire with self-care. Every meeting we lead, every panel discussion, we always ask, what are people doing for self-care? I think also kind of getting that into the dialogue. I'm not talking about going to a spa at the Mandarin Oriental. I mean, getting 8 hours of sleep, or
Hmm.
doing a quick headspace, 10 minutes, you're
Yeah.
breathing, looking out the window, you're noticing the leaf, just that kind of basic stuff, and making that more part of the dialogue too. So
Yeah.
that's, yeah.
I love what you said about and I'll paraphrase, don't impress to be authentic, because you're not talking with, your buddies at the country club. You're really just relating to the human experiences that we all have, like how
Yeah.
your kids and how this, I love that. That's a really great way to kind of think about it. And so many CEOs are type A personalities, as we probably are too, Jamie. we're just unlocking them, hiding them a little bit today. But that's really an important piece. I love that piece. So let's talk about the superpower piece, number two.
Sure.
And this is super important, right? As you look at your talent pool,
Mhm.
it may be shrinking for some companies, or you may not be able to expand the
Mhm.
superpowers and hire in those superpowers.
Mhm.
And so how do you have somebody here where you think this person has really good superpowers, but
Mhm.
at the same point, they're not the way that I traditionally think about things?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that can be kind of like, sometimes people like, when you have a superpower, sometimes it's overpowering.
I
So
hear you. I
yeah,
hear
how do
you.
you how do you kind of unleash that?
Yeah. So there's an article I'll send you if you want to share with folks that
Yes.
Harvard just did about loving your work. And actually, SHRM, which is the Society of HR Management, they just published this. I don't know if you
Oh
can
wow.
see it, but it's all
Hmm.
about how do you get people to really love their work? So I think step one is asking, like just asking folks. So for example, we have a project manager that is a high potential one of our clients, and we were talking to the client the other day, and like that project manager, customer success person, they lead a whole team, and they clearly are good at like the project management nuts and bolts. They're also good at the operations. They're also good. Like sit with that person, say, where do you enjoy your work the most, and how do we dial up those pieces so that you have a job that is, you want to create jobs that are so darn sticky that people don't leave for 10% increases like we saw a lot of in 2021. So that's thing one. Thing two is, research has shown that people get just as much excitement about staying at their organization for lateral moves as for promotions. So giving people stretch assignments, task forces, those plum assignments, things that where they can get exposure to senior leaders. I think that those are all things. But step one is asking the person. And then step two is really then listening, not just asking, but saying, we heard you, and to make your job more interesting. Also, professional development. That is another thing that people are really craving now. It doesn't need to be crazy expensive, but it could be, covering a membership for an industry organization, or letting them attend a virtual conference, during work hours, whatever it might be. Things that just signal, we see you, we know that you're stuck, on like a folding chair at your dining table. So we really want to make it interesting to continue working here.
Yeah, it's funny too, because it's not everybody's money motivated, and I like what you said about progressing your career. I don't know if you watched the show Billions or not. I'm hooked on binge watching this thing, right? And so they work for financial services company, and the boss brings the up and coming analyst in and says, "I'm going to give you a $25 million raise, right? This is your bonus." And like, that's amazing. And they were not at all excited about it, because what they really wanted was the ability to progress in the organization and feel like they were part of the leadership team. And so it's like more than the money at all, right? They just wanted to see that progression, which is exactly to your point. It's you got to unleash and understand people's superpowers for sure. All right, number three, present and steady. And this one, you hit on this first when you talked about this, and I often say this too. People want to be in the office and be around their coworkers, because working from home can sometimes be isolating, but people absolutely hate commuting. I think that's the reason why people don't want to go back to a lot. Now, I know there's a lot of reasons, but for me, I will tell you, commuting was terrible.
It's amazing. And so it's so funny. Any organization who acts like they have this all figured out actually is not telling you their full truth. And I speak to organizations all day, every day about this very topic. So, at Goldman Sachs, they say 3 days in the office is good, 4 days is better, and 5 is best. Other organizations, like Twitter, 100% remote. There is a friend of mine who's a physician over the weekend said that her Philadelphia-based practice has said, for many physicians, you've been working remote, but for those who stay remote, they'll be compensated at 80%. So, organizations are trying to make these changes. Here's the deal. We are still in the middle of a pandemic. No one wants to talk about it. Dr. Fauci from the CDC, he currently has COVID. A client of ours hosted they've reimagined things. They said, we're not going to do the Christmas party and have that get canceled like everyone and their brothers in December. We're going to do it in June. 300 people, roof deck in New York City. Outside, the whole executive team now has COVID. I mean, I love that as humans, I think it's so interesting to be alive and to be a human and to be a parent. I think it's so cool that we continue to be optimistic and think we can still keep on trying. There's like so much data that it's really complicated to hold space with consistency unless we are masked. And this isn't about politics. It's just like about the science. And we have so many data points. But I think we're going to keep on trying, and we're going to just keep on trying. So I think what we need to do is realize that hybrid is here to stay. Goldman is a tremendous example. They're a powerhouse, love them. But I think it's
Hmm.
rare that a company, I don't know of any other companies that have said 5 days are best. What I
Yeah.
more hear from our clients is that they feel like they need to promise people a pony if they come to the
Hmm.
office. So like like there's cotton candy in the lobby. Like it's still really hard to reel people in. So I
Yeah.
think it's about when you really encourage people to come in, making it less about getting the work done. We've already proved we're too productive as humans working remote. I think when you come together, it has to be with intention. Like we're going to do a scavenger hunt outside around New York City, or we're going to get one of those, buses with, the double decker buses like you'd see in London where you can sightsee. Like make it a reason to get together about team building, or just like grab a pavilion in Central Park and just try to
Yeah.
get together in person, those types of things, because that, we can't replicate, life from the shoulders down. We need to be together as humans. But I think it is still tricky to try to architect these plans, and no one has figured it out. And
Yeah.
people who told you that, like they have it all sorted, they're not speaking their full truth.
Yeah. Well, the underlying thing, even before the pandemic, was how do we make work from home work and
Yeah.
flexibility?
Yes.
And if anything has come out of the pandemic that was helping business change and helping leadership change, is understanding that we can be productive
Oh yes.
and be remote. And there is a good hybrid balance that we can hopefully figure out how to make work.
Yeah.
I used to work at Allstate. Um, in Northbrook, Illinois, the insurance company. And recently they announced that they're selling their entire campus. And this thing was huge. There was probably 3,000 people that worked in this. They sold the entire campus. They are not going to have a headquarters anymore, but they're taking all that money and they're putting it to the bottom line, right? Because they must feel like they've got it figured out, that they know how to do it. And maybe it's a combination of WeWork spaces and,
Yeah.
temporary spaces. And
Yeah.
that's really the piece. You just have to make sure you stay connected, right?
So question, and I'm all about the fine print. So are
Mhm.
they having any offices in other locations other than that headquarter campus?
I didn't realize there was going to be a follow-up question to that, Jamie, but
Or
I don't know. No, I don't
okay,
actually know the answer
okay.
to that.
I'm so curious.
But that's a good question. There
Yeah,
has to be, to your point, there has to be some way for you to get together and be connected
right.
with your fellow coworkers and
Yeah,
have those kind of informal conversations with really
absolutely.
helped you bond with people, right?
Yeah,
So they're going to have to figure that out.
yeah,
Let's continue to follow that story
yeah,
because that one
definitely.
I'm interested to see how that shakes
Yeah,
out.
and I ask because what a lot of our clients have done is, if they've said to folks, we're not coming back and we are going to be remote, what they've said is, we're going to have like almost like little mini town halls where, like, let's say there's like
Right,
25 of you in like the Albany Schenectady area. We're going to have an executive come to Albany, get a big Starbucks
right.
outside, and we're going to have coffee and hang out for an hour one day. And we're going to go to
Yeah,
you. And I think that that is kind of the future of work, is getting together with intention periodically, and also going to where your employees are. The other thing
agreed.
I'll share with you is that one of our financial services clients was saying that they've 1,000% been remote, all the things, but now that their analysts are in like that second year graduation analyst program where they're ready to kind of see, you can go to the next level, the skill set is not there.
Hmm.
There's something, companies are tripping still a little bit over the professional development in a fully remote environment where there is not that role modeling that happens in
Yeah.
person. That is, I think, a piece that companies still have some work to do on. Yeah.
You hit the nail. We could talk another hour on that topic because I really think that development of leadership in US companies has really fallen behind. We really don't have good training programs to teach middle managers how to move up from an individual contributor into being managers and then ultimately into leadership roles. But we'll save that for another time because I think Jamie, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. As always, it's a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Great to spend the time. Thank you so much, Craig.